All right, it's 6:30 p.m. on Monday, July 21st. We have all the select board members we expect this evening present here, so I will go ahead and call this regular meeting of the Waterbury Select Board for Monday, July 21st, 2025 to order. Our first item of business is to approve the agenda. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the agenda with the amendment that we change the wording on the consent item A from June 30th to July 7th.
Okay. Motion to approve the agenda as presented with consent agenda A being for July 7th. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Kane, second by Mike. Is there any further discussion? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. We have approved the agenda. That brings us to the consent agenda item. So as we approved, that would be the minutes of our last meeting, which was actually July 7th, 2025. A Switchback Beer Works special event permit, a Wine Vault LLC outside consumption permit for Vermont Beer Collective, 802 Cocktails LLC request to cater, and Bubbo LLC request to cater permit. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion by Kane, second by Mike. Question, Roger?
Nope.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, consent agenda is approved. This brings up to public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for anyone to comment on something that is not on the agenda we just approved. We ask that you keep your comment under 5 minutes. And if we need more time, we can schedule it for a future select board meeting, and we have 5 minutes for that. I will name as chair of the select board. I have received comments about public comment. Individuals can comment on public comment, select board members can comment on public comment. I have, as chair, not provided any feedback to anyone based on public comment. We do ask that as the chair, you refer all comments to me. And that's that. So anyone in person or online who would like to speak on public comment? Yes, yeah, come on up. And we do ask that folks just come up to the front. Our friends from Orca have a microphone and it helps with that online.
So just a little request. I didn't know if we could find some time on the select board agenda to dive in a little bit more to the issue of invasives and what the town policy is about trying to prevent the spread of invasives. And a few incidents just recently that has prompted more concern of mine as I try to keep invasives at bay when it comes to my hay fields. And I see the takeover of invasives in some of these other fields, hay fields and whatnot. And I think people need to understand that it's starting to become a bigger problem than what people anticipate it is. To the point of completely taking over, big chunks of landscape. So just if we can find some time in the not too distant future to talk about what the town policy is. I appreciate that. Is it specifically chervil? Or the other ones? There's turtle, there's phragmites, there's knotweed, there's poisonous parsnip. We have a small chunk of poisonous parsnip at the end of the young flats that I spotted a couple of years ago in the towns up there doing some roadside work. I mentioned that they were probably transporting it, but road foreman who apparently had a class of work in invasives said there was none there, but if you go up there and look right now, the whole bag is filthy with it. So I did alert the guy that material was transported to and let him know that now he has it. Just to be aware of it. And, but the bigger concern is just even with the roadside mowing, going through knotweed, dragging it up the road, that's all it takes to spread it further up the road. Along with a lot of the other invasives. It's bad enough that it's taken over everything, but to assist it and its rapid spread is something we need to try to avoid if we can.
Thanks, Wilford. Anyone else who would like to speak on public forum in the room online? Mike? Go ahead.
Just a comment in response to Chris. I think that'd be a good thing for us to pass the Conservation Commission to work on.
Anyone else would like to speak on public forum? In the room or online? Okay,
I just want to echo Mike's sentiment. I think that's a great task for the Conservation Commission.
okay. Anyone online for public forum? This is. Right, seeing that, I will move us on to our next agenda item, which is initial special event permit review, Jam for the Parks, and I believe we have the event organizer, Kevin, here, if you want to come up.
Everybody, thank you for. I think we said review this with us. We were working on a special event permit to put on a concert in benefit of Vermont Parks Forever, which is raising money for the Vermont State Parks. This year will be the 6th year we've done something like this, the 2nd year benefiting the Vermont State Parks. And we're roughly expecting 300. If that starts getting higher, we could review again. That's about what we had last year, but so we did this. We're looking for parking partners so that we could have one of two options for our stages. And the seat deliveries that Vermont State Parks.
You submitted a town special event permit, and I know maybe you had some back and forth, before we get to board members, Tom, do you have a question or comment as staff?
Well, I guess just my initial comment is, you've got. It sounds like 3 food vendors. Beverage vendor or 2 and. 4 or 5 bands. So 300 seems low based on. Based on that. Can you comment on that?
We're really big. We had a similar model last year when we had it at our home base of cider. So it was about 6 bands, same number of food vendors. For us providing beverages up there. They're local Vermont bands. Some of them are just budding and some of them are somewhat unknown. So the goal, I think, is to put Vermont musicians in front of Vermonters, including Vermont State Parks. I think it would be a much different turnout, or I would expect a much different turnout if we had something more on a national scale. But I think after years of doing this, kind of know what to expect with that. I do understand the concern of that. And even asked the fire chief to sort of help me understand what they would need to provide us at different levels of attendance. I think in an ideal world, we can fit as many people as we can get in there to raise as much money as we can. But just trying to put a realistic number on it for the application.
And do you think is 300 total or is it 300 any given time? For your.
I would say any given time.
That makes more sense to me.
Yeah, I think there's, we have family activities. Music, throughout the whole thing, however, I have a small child myself, I can only go places for 2 or 3 hours before we're gonna move on to the next thing.
I know the rule.
We're hoping to get a lot of the community and families in for this, and understanding the difference in their approval.
So just the email communication we had back and forth was just really about, what I suggested was the select board is likely to have a question about public safety, traffic, those sort of things, so just be prepared to answer those sort of questions. We didn't have a very, we didn't get back and forth and had 500 word debates, but I also suggested that we've got an event planned for September, and so there's time for the applicant to come back to us if need be, if there's some additional conditions, concerns, conversation from tonight. So I think we understand that this is probably, the first step and maybe a couple iterations to get through this.
Yeah, and I think parking to breach that 300 mark is the biggest issue for us. Sort of, we've been chatting about whether we can cap it, or how we would address that if we're starting to approach that pre-sale.
Where I canvassed a lot of the local businesses up and down 100, and have a few solid, maybe solid, it's not great for making. I think, my next steps are to try to lock those in as soon as possible, as well as, Washington and the Royal County Sheriff's Office to really understand what they would need to provide for their best recommendations for the traffic pinch point of Reservoir Road and River Country.
And I did confirm with the zoning administrator, there's no zoning permit issue. I know we've run into that once or twice, but we're all set here from that perspective.
Kane?
So yes, parking lot. Yes. My biggest concern is not. The event itself or the amount of guests, it's how the guests get from where they move to park. To the event. And I'm picturing several routes, you're parking up on 100 somewhere. You're walking down 100, which is dangerous if you're parking up around Maple Street. Walking down Hollow and then having to cross 100 is another concern of mine. And in my, I don't have any park up there, I don't know exactly how many cars the park accommodates. I know it's quite a few, but it's not very.
It's not very. I'd say 75 to 100 if parked correctly, or we would have parking attendants doing that job there. The off-site parking that we do have confirmed at the moment, I spoke with Ari Fishman, the owner of Sin Bar. They can fit about another 100 between their lot and our front yard, and we would be providing in-passenger van shuttles. That's what we did last year. We had some partners up in Stowe. We only had 75 spaces at Stowe Cider for our use. So very flatbread. So we had offsite parking up at Stowe Hotel and did shuttles pretty much every 15 minutes or so. And in this instance, we would be discouraging anybody from I try that every single day, and I don't know why. So I understand people's thing.
Thing about, I know you're using state facility. As a state purpose, it's second, you basically take out any public access for swimming and all the other events that they have at what usually is a pretty busy time of year. But they didn't, because I don't see, there's nothing in the permit application about the state and granted, you know.
Actually have, visual that work for the state parks.
Oh, they.
You wanna come up just so we can hear it online, and thank you for being here.
Sure. Yeah, the state is willing to host the event. And what was the question? I didn't know.
Well, I was just, I'm on the board of Friends of Waterbury.
Yeah.
I'm pretty familiar with all the activities. Walt, one of our board members, is one of the,
Where's that?
one of the main staff people. And we were just wondering, I was just wondering how this facility, basically, it's gonna be closed for, it seems like, for regular activity. Not closed,
It's
but-
not, it won't be closed, but it'll be for ticket holders of the event, and since it's a fundraiser for parks.
Right.
And for Vermont Parks Forever, which is a very valuable relationship. And especially these days, the budgets and the finances of state parks were not funded by the general fund. We were funded by what we bring into the gate. Every bit helps, and we find this is potentially very valuable sort of event. The busiest time period for the park will actually be over Labor Day.
Right.
We used to only keep the park open until Labor Day, and then we closed it, but the community, local community especially wanted us to keep it open till October, and we did. Yep, and it is, it's very light use. After maybe that first weekend after Labor Day, it's nice, it'll potentially still be busy. But I find that after Labor Day, that's why we schedule it for that time, right?
Most of the out of state closed, so.
Exactly.
Fine,
Yeah.
For a couple of weeks.
Yeah, then they come back forward. Okay, I'm glad, because I thought this is a benefit, but I just didn't see anything that said anything. I assume that the state had given consent.
Yeah, once we get through the initial, once Stowe Cider gets the initial, okay, I'll be working on drafting a license, a little outline, the details from the park then.
And Stowe Cider, I assume would be whatever vendor.
Yeah, we will be in a better, there's other sponsors, notarized, sponsor will be serving there.
Legally,
Yeah, but I know we are on our license, you'll see that. Definitely come through.
I know from being a licensee, for NQID.
Yeah.
Other questions, Roger?
Will swimming be permitted?
If people want to swim, they'll be able to swim, and UNIAC still has their boats there, they'll be able to rent boats to festival goers. Obviously, nobody that is drinking or finished to have been drinking, but yes,
How do you police that though? I don't think people will be drinking.
well, that wouldn't be my responsibility, UNIAC's a private entity, so they're responsible for doing the rentals. If they feel that it's probably, if they feel there's too much risk, then they might not offer rentals. I haven't spoken with them entirely about it, other than to say that it was a possibility. We'll do that rentals.
Would you be at all concerned about people who have been drinking, like you to be drinking, swimming?
Well, there's always concern that someone's drinking. We intend to have extra staff on, there'll be volunteers as well. And yeah, I mean, if it was a big enough concern, I mean, we could say this one. You know,
So, I don't know who's sharing the liability here, but I'm to.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. We don't want, we prefer safe events, but most of our events are usually pretty safe, but we get it.
Are you gonna, limit or prohibit motorized crafts during that day?
Yes, there won't be any space from the launch or people out, but there's several other launches in the fresh.
Yeah, I was gonna segue from Roger's question straight into security. Where so it says that you've been in contact with the sheriff's department's plural, in Stowe PD. Have they gotten that?
I assume they're pretty busy right now, they have not gotten back to me and sort of that's sort of a spirit calling. Every other day. Hoping to resolve that as soon as possible, we'll also have private security.
That was gonna be my next question, private security.
Yeah, they're gonna handle ID and also any conflict or situations that arise that would. Not be something of a staff.
And who is that private security?
I never talked to.
Dr. Thayer.
Other questions from select board members? What are folks' input on next steps? I'll say thank you for coming in, thank you State Parks and Bolton for being here. Obviously, seems like a great event wanting to benefit the community. I feel a little bit in a hard place to totally okay something where we don't have confirmed vendors that feel pretty essential, mainly in the traffic department, so I'm just curious how we as a board feel about next steps and wanting to. Actually, you folks need to get going with planning, but making sure we're not opening something that we feel like isn't adequately supported.
I would recommend that before approval, I would feel more comfortable knowing that there was a police department seeing more generalized security than chocolate thunder and more law enforcement. And then just making sure we're doing the best you can in whatever way you can to keep pedestrians off.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the curiosities too, is if there is one vehicle there or brick vehicle. That's what happened.
Roger and then Matt?
Yeah, it seems to me like we're gonna need someone in an authority position right at that corner of Reservoir and 100. Both to control the traffic and also to direct people to the offsite parking, which is more than a mile away. It's not right next door. And to convince people to drive all the way down Guptill to Zen Barn, is a fair bit of explanation unless you got that figured out. It seems like it's a fairly complicated scenario once that fence goes up.
There's nothing in here that says what the admission price is and is any food and alcohol sale. Does that benefit the park or is that strictly the vendors?
So every year we've done an event, this is the Jam for the Land, at the end of the parks, create a cider, which, sales of each cider either off-site from the event. Goes, a portion that goes cheaper than the state parks. And so that'll be our primary cider on-site for that day. And then the beer vendors are also, sponsors, so that is the way they can help them.
And the cost of admission will side is,
It is, $25, thank you.
That's an old number.
I was surprised the postman didn't say that.
There's we're sort of waiting to have
Get another postman put up.
well, yeah, to make sure where it's gonna be, make sure it passes the so. We did make announcements, last Thursday or Friday about the lineup. That poster is not included in the packet which was submitted. I can submit that as well, for the recent application. I did have a question to work out signage. If we were to have chalkboard signs that are block full or something like that, is that something that would need to be approved, or is that this understood as part of them?
Same with the sign, you're very typical, the Rotary does that all the time. And I would think that would be a good thing to have a sign that says lot full. I know it's not gonna do much for your business, but you say, lot full, as I think Roger said, if you go from the Zen Barn to the site, it would be a trek. At least on foot, I don't know if there's gonna be a shovel.
I think we would be putting it on the media posts about your offsite parking is so that. As well as the other. Buyers from the center.
I'll move to approve provisionally, suggest that the applicants come back with a tighter security plan and that's any concerns that involve.
Second.
Okay, the same motion by Roger, second by Mike. Further discussion on this? Do you all feel clear about essentially making sure we have some final contracts around access to the site? And then our next meeting is August 4th, so just to say it would be easy for us to do that and. Question?
Just some things to think about, Zen Barn has already had problems in the past with people walking down the road. So when you're setting that crossing there, I would ask that you be really careful about that set up and it's not good when it's not blocked. I'm also concerned, there's a lot of neighbors that are right on that ridge of the dam. I don't know if anybody's talked to the neighbors there or they're aware that there's possibly going to be a lot of people parking on the maybe on Sunset Drive and something road. So I'm just, I can handle that. Since people do live, there and probably more upset they can't get to their houses. So just something to keep in mind when you're setting up your road parameters, especially up there.
Right, motion and second, any further discussion on this? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, any abstaining? All right, provisional approval with a final confirmation on August 4th, and thank you very much for coming in. We appreciate that. All right, that brings us to our next agenda item, which is quarterly budget update. I'm gonna turn it right over to Tom, and we have printed copies in our packets and many empty packets, if any extra, if anyone needs them, they're also posted on the meeting materials online.
Did the whole number formatting on the side, so I can refer to the actual, line numbers. Just want to point out something overall, when you look at pay through this, in general, pay will show a little over 50%, and that's just a timing issue. About on June 30th, and how many days were in the start of the year in January versus December 31st. Couple things I wanna point out, general government side, lines 9 and 10, and line 9, we had a, additional person join our insurance this year, so we'll be a little bit over on that by the end. Line 10 is deductibles, and that's everyone in the town and our share of the deductibles, and that's an estimated number. People have to spend a certain amount of their own money before we pay the deductible, so you wouldn't expect that to be anything significant halfway through the year, and it's not, so that's a good sign, I think. Looking down a little further at lines 19 and 20, professional services, other is a lot of things. It's IT services is a good, is a chunk of it too. Included in the budget was really money for flood consulting. I broke that out when doing the actuals just to show it. We spent quite a bit on flood consulting so far. Part of that is a monthly consulting fee of $1,500, but a big chunk of that is to the engineering firm that helped us with the hazard mitigation grant application. And now that application is submitted, I am told we are in a likely 3 to 5 month holding pattern before you know anything about that, and so those expenses will drop off shortly in the future. So
Does that money come from the 37,000?
yes, or 32,000. So we'll probably be a bit over a year end. Hopefully it results in some grant revenue in the future. Wanted to head down a bit, 4748 were the ARPA funds that were approved in prior years and just finally spent this year. And then line 49 was the budget amendment from the floor to add $15,000 for crew. And I just want to point out line 50, that's debt on this building, and that will be spent to the penny. So we've only spent 10 grand so far, but we do 2 payments a year. The first one in May's interest only. Going down a little further, to line 57, the budget for highway, it's always said highway regular pay, it's highway and parks. That really is an amalgamation of a few lines, and if you go a little further, way down, which is line 260, there's a budget in parks of almost $50,000 for regular pay, and then there's a budget in cemetery, the next page, that has $27,000 for regular and part-time pay, and some money for contractors. There's a couple of our full-time highway crews that later in the year I will look at their hours and move those expenses to parks and cemetery. And so the highway budget assumes that to happen. I just haven't done it this year, and I do that based on the actuals. So we didn't hire anyone new. Just a matter of where it's gonna go by year end, and we try to make an estimate. But making sure we cover all the full-time costs. So that's essentially on budget. What is a challenge? For years, up until last year, there was no highway budget for overtime. It was baked into the cake, but I broke it out as a separate line item. Budgeted 45 grand, which is as much overtime as we ever had, and we spent it. And we spent it because of mud season. And the winter in general, we spent a lot plowing, we spent a lot in mud season. Yeah, didn't have any huge blizzards, but when there's 6 inches, you go out.
A lot of snowstorms.
And so that was a bit of a hard time. Now that summer has come. You know, the overtime really wanes during the summer into the fall until we plow again, and we'll see what that brings. But I suspect that will need to go up next year for the budget. Going down to the next page. Yep, sorry.
Couple of questions, just going back, I know back in general government. Both services look like. You know,
What line you want?
That's,
We're on
17.
line 17,
Yep,
and the legal, which is line 21. I'm assuming the legal's probably up because of our labor, agreement and having them review that. Has that?
a little bit. It's also up a little bit, for things like Stanley Lawson. It's up a little bit for the Housing Trust Fund.
Okay. That explains that, and computer services, is it been anything normal?
Yes, we've had some persistent and consistent network issues that I think we're finally seeing the end of it. But we've had issues with our Wi-Fi, we've had issues in this room.
They're saying no problems today.
It's no problems today, but I think we're generally past it. We also have some projects that I'd like to do in 2026, so I'll probably bring forth to you a budget with some increase. Yeah, and some of that is routine, like we want to upgrade the email server, that sort of thing.
Computer, oh, it's a challenge.
They're a challenge. If our consultant who's he's got a partner on occasion, but he's essentially a one-man band. If we go to a full-service firm, I've had a couple conversations, and in general, the number is gonna be 60, 75. So we pay for computer services in other places across the budget too, but I dare say we pay less than half of that in a typical year. So I'm pretty happy with the money we're getting, the value we're getting for our money at this stage.
So we do it on a case by case, basis, not like a year.
It's, yep, essentially we get a monthly invoice based on the volume of service, and the challenge I've had in some conversations with the sort of the bigger full service consult firms is that they charge you for network monitoring. A flat monthly fee, and in theory, that makes a certain amount of sense. If your network is compromised at midnight, they can know about it. So that makes a certain amount of sense on paper. On the other hand, 99.9% of the information on the network is public. We're not a dispatch or a police operation where we're operating 24/7. I'm not sure we need to really pay for that service. And so that's where the struggle comes in sometimes. Going down to the second page and looking at some highway numbers. We have a big budget on line 77 for vehicle and equipment maintenance. We spent more than halfway through the year. Part of that is there's been a couple really big purchases that we don't make every year. I don't think we're gonna overspend that per se. We just made some decisions early in the year to make some purchases. The rest is just maintenance, and so much of our equipment is new enough, it's under warranty. Line 80 and a number of other departments, you see a charge called Public Works Director. That's Bill Woodruff's time. That's just part of the EFUD town money. So at some point, I will bill that line and I will write EFUD a check, and at other times I will bill EFUD for my time and other times and write the town a check. But that's all formulaic, and that payment will happen. Couple of the big highway lines are coming. Summer maintenance is really crack sealing is a big part of that, and that's gonna come. You go a little further down, chloride, which is something we put on the gravel roads just to reduce dust, that's gonna likely be spent pretty close to the end. Salt wasn't too bad. We've reduced salt, and I think that's generally worked, and I think we'll probably stay within budget. We purchase, we don't really have salt storage. We don't really purchase in advance. But that number to start the year, we have a bit more winter, is pretty reasonable for us. Winter sand, we're actually getting close to really close to having a full sand pile, so we'll likely be well within budget for that line by year end. Gravel resurfacing, we haven't hit that line yet, but you'll see later in the capital funds, we have purchased quite a bit of gravel. Going a little bit further, to the highway debt, again, that will be spent to the penny. That's lines 97, 98, and then line 99, that big number, that's just an internal transfer to the capital fund, it's not actual cash. But that will be 100% moved, before year end.
Can you tell me about line and about?
Sure, insurance, so we've made, we've made 3 payments thus far. 3 quarterly payments through the LCT. The overall bill is up a little bit. We're not gonna, some other places were under, so we take that cost and distribute it. We get insurance through them, general liability, property, we also get workers' comp through them, so the workers' comp is distributed based on actual payroll. The general liability is based on a bunch of other factors. But in general, the rates are a bit up more than budgeted, and that's gonna be reflected in a few places. That market behind the scenes is, I think, hardening everywhere. And I think the floods are part of that. Not that we had flood experience per se, but I think in general, it's impacting the insurance market in Vermont. Going down further to library, no real red flags there. You'll see their computer service line, which is 112, right? That hasn't been hit yet. At some point, I go through all the bills and reconcile them, and I'll split out some library versus other town bills. And I may in the future just suggest that we put one computer service line in the budget because it's all one taxpayer. That line 118 to MBOF, that's just an internal transfer to the municipal building fund. Which I did make earlier this year. Interesting thing to me always about the library. Roughly half our budget is payroll. Roughly 10% of our budget is books. And that includes the e-books. It's always just struck me that more of the library budget is not. It's not actual books. But there's no red flags in the library budget. They generally hold off on making some expenses until year end to make sure they don't go over, so they're good about that. Going down a little further on the public safety side, the state doesn't bill us until the quarter ends, and so we've only paid 1 quarter thus far this year. And the WASI budget, the start of the year, they were in there. They haven't historically billed us according to schedule for their annual appropriation. At the start of the year, they were in their building project. And our cash was flush, so I paid them half the annual appropriation and then we'll true up before year end. But we'll spend that to the budgeted penny. For highway, we don't pay for fire going down to 141, we don't pay our under regular pay, the chief and some of the leadership folks don't get paid until close to the end of the year, and then the part-timers get paid throughout the year, but no red flags in that pay. Going to the next page, line 148, the dispatching is a big number, and that's another one that we'll pay quarterly, and they just bill us at quarter end. So we'll hit that line for sure. And fire has a big budget down in 169 for new equipment. That's not capital, that's a lot of replacements, that's the firefighting gear. Instead of gear, you'd be amazed how expensive it is, but again, fire does a good job of holding off until close to the year end, which gives me the chance to have a conversation. If we've got an overall budget challenge, we can delay some things. So Gary's ability to do that and work with me is really appreciated and helps to manage the overall.
Stand on 159, like, part of how we do one maintenance. Did we hear expect?
I don't know offhand. I'd have to look at the detail and we see. Don't recall that one offhand. I wanna say, don't quote me, I wanna say we purchased tires for one of the vehicles, which are quite expensive, but I would get back to you on that one. I trying to remember the larger one, but that one doesn't ring a bell, and going down to the health and social services, which starts at line 181, that's a little bit of, it's a little bit of a safety net. There's only, if you take out public health line, which is Central Vermont Home Health, that's a little bit of money that's spread out in the event, you know, we need to pay something to an individual to help with something like an animal control issue beyond what I do. I have had a conversation with the board, having gotten to a final agreement about town service and having a set appropriation for that. But I really view that as money that hopefully we won't need to spend, but in the event there's a significant issue with the dog, there may be some liability there. Going down to rec, where there's always a lot of action, I always like to say that the recreation budget is the most difficult to project, the most difficult to budget. Katerina does a great job of tying revenues and expenses together, which we can do pretty well. The pool, I think, within recreation is the single biggest challenge. Staffing is always a challenge, getting trained staff is always a challenge. I think the best news I can say about the pool is the capital project we did about sealing the challenge seemed to really work. The pool's holding a good temperature, we're not adding a lot of water, which is a great sign. That's what we're hoping to accomplish. So the idea is if we can do that and maybe do the deep end, we can just buy more years and avoid having a multi-million-dollar conversation. But I suspect every year in perpetuity, I will come to you with a budget for the pool where the net cost to run the pool, you know, goes up to $3,000 to $5,000 a year. And I think that's just the reality of operating a municipal pool. So we work hard to manage payroll. But it's always a real challenge, and so much of the cost is just payroll.
Do you put the pool maintenance that, you know, modular maintenance in here, or is that goes to capital budget?
Larger maintenance items are in the capital budget. EFUD water crew does a lot to help open the pool. And that's part of those cross charges between the town and EFUD. That may change in the future. The big challenges I see with the pool, in addition to lining the deep end, is the filter building and the filter system is old. So I'd like to, this year before the year end, just get a quote for a new filter. It's you know, it's a diatomaceous surf filter, which is perfectly fine. For larger pools, they've moved to sand filters generally, and the filter works, but you can't buy parts. You know, generally speaking, it's nothing hugely complex, so if it breaks, a crew's got a lot of ingenuity, and I think they'll find a way to make it work generally, but it'd be nice to have a newer system. And then the newer system could come with an automated chlorine system. Since I've been here a few times, there have been nothing dangerous, but minor issues where, you know, someone didn't turn off the chlorine pump, which means the next day the levels are too high, and if it's hot and sunny, it dissipates pretty quick, and within a half day, you can swim again. But it'd be nice to automate it. And have it work go to a cell phone in the event there's something not correct.
Is it in current system? Has to go and figure out what the, how much chlorine put in every day.
Yeah, and that's part of the routine. Be nice to make that easier. Going a little further to the next page. Thus far, I feel pretty darn good about the summer program and how that's been running and how the budget has come through. It's been changed an awful lot since I've been here. I feel like every year there's even more changes, but I feel pretty confident that we're delivering a good program and a safe program. We have downsized a little bit, and I think that was really based on legitimate safety concerns, but I think it was valid. All the payroll numbers thus far look pretty good. I know June 30th isn't far into the season. One thing you don't see here, and one of the changes we had is we used to have a 10,000 plus budget for trips during the summer. We took trips to state parks and rented buses, and the more we dug into that, and we did a few my first couple of years here, is that it's not a great trip if you're going an hour on a bus, an hour there, an hour back. You don't necessarily have a ton of time at the park. The buses are really expensive, and for the staff, it's pretty chaotic. You've got 100 kids swimming in murky water. A little bit hard to do head counts constantly, the way you can do in a pool. And so we've eliminated with that because we just didn't feel like we were getting a lot of the bang for our buck, and we didn't like the safety component of it. Going down to parks.
I have a question about that. How much does the summer rec program figure within that? $270,000.
Yep, so if you go to, we'd have to go further down, but if you go to page. Give me a minute here. You go to the, couple pages down, the numbering restarts on the revenue side. And on that page, I should have page numbered, but if you go down to. So line 40 is swimming pool income. And then the big number of 127,000 is the rec program revenues, and so we're over budget to the good on the revenue side. And the mini camps or something outside of the summer period, so that'd be line 43. So we hit the target, essentially everyone pays by the time it all starts. Going down to parks, that all looks pretty good. Again, we're gonna move some payroll money there. And then we're also gonna look at cemetery, and that's all similar work because the summer crew does both. But so far, everything looks pretty good. The grounds maintenance line item, which is 269, is an amalgamation of little things, that, you know, play for the Little League fields and soccer nets as we need them, those sort of things. And again, we try to hold back as we can throughout the year to make sure we're within that budget, overall.
What about your passport?
Um,
271.
Yep, a little bit over. I know we had them cleaned this year. Challenge with the tennis courts, and this is an interesting thing that we recently learned, is we think it's proximity to the interstate that they get, kind of an odd film on them. Yeah. And the best we can think, it's just from all the emissions from the vehicles. But they get kind of an odd slime and need to be cleaned.
She also replaced all the posts.
Yeah, and that was needed, I think.
Is that from that meeting?
That's all part of it.
Is that in itself, I guess, is expensive?
And we've got the tennis courts also taped up for pickleball, so you can do kind of either or.
Part-time pay is gone up. You said you contracted in mowing now?
No, that's gonna be moved around. A lot of that is gonna hit the cemetery budget by year end, so we put it in one place for a while and we threw it up. So I think about both in terms of the contractors that we occasionally use and the payroll. I really look at it as a whole. Because it really is one thing, you know, so the parks, part-timers just go there, and then we move it around and we true it up and we essentially close out the summer. So yeah, that'll all shift. Right now, we've got a summer crew of 3 that work 40 hours. My impression is they're doing pretty good. We had to hire, we contracted out mowing 2 years ago for the cemetery, and that was probably 30 grand just for the cemetery, so having a summer cruise is a far better option. Looking at planning, nothing major here on the first page. It's really just payroll and fringe. When you go to the second page. Line 295, that's really the one we're talking about. So we had budgeted $80,000 in the town plan update line. I'm hoping that about 30 of that would be grant funded. And we didn't get the grant, so we really have less of a budget, and the planning department knows that. So we really have $50,000 for the town plan update. We've got a consultant under contract to do all that work for just a shade under $50,000. Some of that will probably linger into 2025. But everyone is aware that we've lost the grant. Going down a little further to line 312, we haven't had expenses from the Conservation Commission yet, but as we talked about at the last meeting, we'll incur a little bit there. And then going down to cemetery, Mark, you'll see on, or sorry, Mike, you'll see on 318, we have that part-time pay. So until the summer ends, all we book there is when on occasion, we pay public works employees to go do a weekend grave opening. And that's, I think, $125 for that work. And then we look at the actual hours of the summer crew, and we'll move a bunch of their expenses there when the summer's out. It's just too much of a hassle to do on a weekly basis. And then contractors for the cemetery, when we budgeted, we've always had this bit of a concern about needing to contract out things again, because we didn't have the summer crew signed yet. And so we budgeted some money in part-time pay, some money in contractors. We're likely not to need the contractors. We'll spend some of that money on cleaning of the gravestones. But in general, we should be really good with cemeteries. I think we're in a pretty good place. Just want to point out the oddity of line 334. So that was a late bill that came in a couple months ago from the last flood. Which was in July, so I don't know why it took so long for that bill to get to us. But we paid it, and it's part of the FEMA claim.
In the contractors, is that part we use sandblast the stones?
No, I believe they acid wash.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a bill for sandblast, just acid wash. And then we have a separate, not in here, but we have a separate fund for the veterans monuments. And so if we have to do specific work on those, we can pull from a separate pot of funds, but nothing yet this year. But there's a little investment fund with some cash in there. Special articles, nothing to really talk about. They got approved and they get paid.
I was just wondering about line 82, the tree maintenance, 4,100 for 1 tree.
Yep,
Wondering, where's that tree? That seems high for 1 tree.
yep, that was a,
Trees taken down and wasn't even close.
it does seem high, and I agree. It was one big ash tree on Main Street, so they had to, intertwine with the utility lines.
Where was that, you know?
South Main, I forget the exact address.
Right in front of the children's,
That one was paid for.
Okay.
It was across the street from there, but nearby. So there were 2 big ash trees that had been rolled out for. One was in front of the children's.
Hunger Mountain.
Hunger Mountain. And that one, Green Mountain Power took down. The one across the street was ours. Since then, we inoculated the remaining orange ash trees. Which was, I think, $500-600, and it should be good for 2 years. And then won't impact this line item, but we have, I believe, 2 big maples in Hope that need to come down. And so those will be expensive trees again. That will come out of cemetery budget. Those are wind ash trees.
One was humble.
Yeah. So yeah, but you're right, $4,100 is for 1 tree is a healthy amount.
Did that not go up the bid, so channel, did that not go up the bid?
We didn't formally bid it, Bill Woodruff calls around the 3 or 4 local firms, and part of it is also just availability, but the pricing is generally about the same from all. I went going back to, we were on line 350-ish. Which is the start of highway capital. 354 and 355, so big budget there. We thus far have just seen the first bill for Nealon Flats, which was the milling. Some of that bill is actually $100,000. Some of that I billed to the gravel roads line because we took several thousand yards of material off that road and moved it to Perry Hill and some of it around the curve. Nealon Flats and Ripley, so really it was part of that gravel expense. So it's been moved there, but we're gonna true up Nealon Flats and then do a huddle about what's left within our budget to finish up the year, and there's about 20 priorities. But we'll get there.
Bridge with the potholes and random.
That's been part of the conversation. I think they did a pretty good job in Park Row.
Park Road's great. Talking about another road.
I'd like to remove the potholes and the speed bumps, so can we talk about both?
Sure, okay. Yeah, that's pretty effective.
Bridge and culverts, we historically had a budget for, and it's not necessarily, even if there's a project plan, but it's in the event that we need to do some work on an emergency basis, and so that's money that we'll hold back and maybe can have a conversation about. Either not spending, depending on the overall budget, or plugging a little bit of that and doing some last minute paving. September timeframe. Gravel road rebuild, some of that was Nealon Flats, some of that is the trucking we're doing and getting done, but I really wanna. Hit that budget in full and spend that local up the tax money. And the truck was the approved truck by the voters, I expect to get the second bill for the chassis, sometime in my lifetime. I'm hoping within 8 or 9 months, but. Seems like generally you've got a year and a half on a truck. Total. I'm going down a little further. Open up all. We should. On the fire side, we spent $733,000 this year on the 2 voter approved vehicles, one last year, one this year. And the one approved this year, the voters approved 380. We will spend some more money because there's some outfitting to do in the truck. But Gary has agreed to hold off on that until we sell the old truck, which we actually didn't budget for, so we should be in a pretty good position in fire capital fund. I think we're hoping to get 50, 60 or so for that old truck. Also just another example of Gary being flexible and working with me, which is always appreciated. On the recreation capital fund, big number there for the pool. And we're under budget and that project is done, so that's great. For the mowers, we bought a couple mowers. We decided to buy a couple used mowers instead of a new commercial mower. We just haven't gotten the life out of the commercial mowers we thought we would. Then that next line down, 377 for the facility study, we are getting near the finish line. I think we'll have one more internal meeting with the architecture firm, and then we'll have likely have a select board conversation about some preliminary plans and some numbers to go with that. Haven't seen those final numbers yet, not gonna speculate on what they might be, but they will be significant.
Have that AED machine ready.
Right. And on the municipal building operating fund. This has been the bane of my existence, and especially Bill Woodruff's existence for a couple of years now. We budgeted a lot more for building maintenance, and we seem to be through the challenges with the heating and cooling system. Spent way over in 2024. We're in a better place now. I'm sure you've seen even just the regular maintenance bills, which are significant, but we seem to be doing a lot better. We also have $25,000 for a card access and security system and just haven't fully moved on that yet. But I expect to. So overall, no big red flags on the expenditure side. We've got some expenses we can always hold back on if we need to, or hope to, but we can do that. overall, the expenses tend to look pretty good. Going to the revenue side, first tax installment is due pretty soon. People are already making pretty substantial payments, and that's good to see. But that number, we will certainly hit. And then the going down to line 7, that 0.225 of 1% of school taxes, that's the law and that's formulaic. So we're also gonna hit that, in fact, be very slightly over. In line 4, the interest is what's billed monthly. And the penalty is billed at year end. Tax sale costs are a bit of an oddball expense. We always budget something, but those are fees that we recover that our attorney bills as part of the tax sale process. So when we get a bill for the tax sale, there's a statutory limit, but generally speaking, those bills are based off, are passed on to the delinquent taxpayer. Going down a little further, you'll see that big revenue in line 12, that's we bill EFUD, and I just haven't trued up those amounts yet for this year. But that's essentially portion of my time, portion of the accounting staff services time, front desk staff, the amalgamation of all that. And then going down further to lines 14, 16, and 17, those are the big state payment amounts. And those generally come in November 1st, on or about. And so that's not unusual to not see them. Going down to line 21, the Vermont Highway Aid money, we actually just this past week, so after June 30th, got our first quarterly payment. A little over 30,000, and so we'll hit that. It just is gonna take a while, and we benefited in an odd way. Not overall, obviously, but in prior years, 2023 and 2024, when the floods happened, the state advanced our highway payments for the whole year, just to help us out, and so that hasn't happened, but we haven't flooded.
$123,000 in current use. Do you know how many properties that represents?
I don't, but I can get it for you.
Okay, that'd be.
Going a little further, I just want to point out a couple of things under the service fees. On line 35, the town clerk's fees are not hugely, but trending over budget. They've been down really since real estate transactions closed. Slowed during COVID, and they really, they used to be 90 grand, and they're really still down, but I'm at least pleased that we're not going down further. Historical Society, that line 37, that's a charge I will bill to them. I do it twice a year, so I'm actually working on the bill now for the first half of the year, but there's one staff person, set hours that the town pays for, and there's a second person that the Historical Society pays for. So that person acts as a town employee, and we get reimbursed from them. I bill twice a year for them. So if that employee only costs 10,000, that's what we bill, but the revenue and the expenses match to the penny. Going down a little further, we talked about the rec in line 43. Mini camps are something that we see throughout the year, and so there's a mini camp for Christmas week. There's a mini camp for Thanksgiving week. A few others coming up. Line 46, rec building rentals. That's really not just buildings. That's building, fields, pavilions, everything. I do want to talk a little bit about line 52, planning fees. The board a year or so ago increased planning fees pretty significantly. They hadn't increased in a long time. Despite that, they are below budget, and that's just because the amount of permits we're issuing is down. We issued 90 permits last year. We're on a similar pace this year. Pre-COVID, we were issuing 120 or so. so likely in next year, we'll have to adjust that revenue to be a little bit lower, not dramatically, but a little bit. Looking at line 57, that's money that is coming from the reappraisal fund to pay a portion of our lister who was made full-time in 2024. And then just hopefully absorb more of that over time and leave the reappraisal fund untouched from a payroll perspective, but that's because the lister is doing the reappraisal in-house and leading that, and so the reappraisal fund is there to finance that. Looking at line 61 debt service, and I've always wanted to rename that to something different. Interest in sweep on CDs is really interest on our checking account. Most of it happens in the second half of the year when we collect tax payments and we're flush with cash. The next three lines, which total 110,000, are all funds we take from our investment funds. Essentially, we're skimming the interest off the top, and that's in varying amounts, a pretty long-standing tradition here. And helps a lot with the budget. And then going down to line, the last page, always a little miscellaneous revenue that comes in, some of that's planned and known. And then the FEMA reimbursement at the end, you'll see big numbers there, but that's really based on 2024 costs. So on the FEMA side, we have two more projects yet to do. There's a bridge on Municipal Road that's about $50,000, and that would be completed in August. And then there was a roadside slide that we've got to get to, and that's in the range of 150. And so FEMA has actually paid us for those projects already, our share of it, and then we're just going to finish up and do the work. But between the 2023 and not reflected in the numbers, but interesting point of conversation that I suspect would be a future agenda item. Between 2023 and 2024, we actually have a surplus of FEMA funds, and I don't have an exact accounting for you, but it's in the range of 100,000. That happened because most of our projects, it's an emergency, you do the repair, and you work with FEMA to get reimbursed. For three of our projects, the soccer field damage near the ice center in 2023, in the last lingering 2024 projects, we did not complete them immediately. And FEMA sends its engineers and they estimate the cost of the project. And you get reimbursed based on that, and the estimates proved to be high. And so there are some funds that when talking with the state, we can reprogram and we can reprogram them towards, and so it's already money in our bank. So we can reprogram them towards doing other work related to those emergencies, or in general, I think there's an interest and willingness to have a conversation about flood abatement prevention measures. And so I've mentioned to the state that we've talked about raising the utilities behind this building. And that's a possibility. The state has also said that one way we can reprogram them is we can simply apply that towards our local match for these projects, which would mean we're not spending anything, we're keeping it in our back pocket. So in an odd way, the FEMA projects, there's been some recent press about some towns where they've got deep, multi-million-dollar notes just to have cash to get through their operations while they're waiting for FEMA. And in an odd way, we were not in that position. We were better off because their engineers estimated high. And at the time, I'm not an engineer. I don't know if their estimates were high or low, but I wasn't going to argue if it seemed high to Bill Woodruff. So it's a good problem to have, and we'll have future conversation about that once I get some final numbers, which should come in the next 2 or 3 months once we complete the rest of the projects. So it's an odd position to be in, but it's better than the alternative.
So we have 357 coming in.
That was based, so
Are we expecting significant amount more?
no, this is money that's come in. So we've gotten what we've gotten basically. The only money that hasn't come in is there's money for my time. For my administrative overhead that will come in, probably in the range of $50,000 for the last couple storms. And so that all hasn't come in, and that doesn't come in to the very end when everything's closed out, so we've got to figure out this. Dangling participle of this money challenge before I can bill for my time, if I've got it ready to go.
It's just like you said, a lot of towns have. That they're due from FEMA and they're wondering with the administration cuts to FEMA, whether they're see that. So
Yeah.
we're in pretty good shape.
We're in pretty good shape.
I think I see a question. I just say, thank you, Tom. I know many of them don't have full-time town managers, so the fact that we have staff that can do that, I certainly appreciate as compared to many of the small rural towns I work with that work.
Just one question, posing question, Ring Road, is that, do we maintain that now, or is that a little problem? And that's
So-
because the guardrail is $5,000.
So if you drive up Ring Road, there's a turnaround partway up, and that's the end of our portion.
And that's what the guardrail is.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was, we thought that was a safety issue. In the winter, I drove that in my little Corolla, and I tended to agree.
As long as that we're maintaining.
Yeah, above that, it's a class 4, I believe.
Yeah. And the other thing is I noticed a lot of expenses like office supplies, mileage, postage, and way over budget. Taxpayers, you know, because if we don't keep those in check, they just get higher and higher and higher every time we budget. Yeah.
The postage was over. We spent money on mailing for the rental registry. So that was a chunk of it. And that's hopefully a one-time.
Yeah. Incentive to stay with this budget.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
Good.
Other select board members, have questions or comments on any of this, Tom? Any other like high level takeaways or things you want to make sure are on our radar moving forward?
I think this year we're in an okay position. You know, we're gonna, I think, high level in the next. Hopefully, the next meeting, we'll have final paving numbers for new and flats, and we can talk about closing out the rest of the year and where we have been. The other piece, high level. Haven't spent any money, but we're researching it, is we've talked about, talked a lot internally, and a little bit here about temporary speed bumps. You know, temporary, they require a little bit of hardware to mount to the street, but I guess I increasingly think that that might be a good solution to some of our traffic problems, but to buy roughly a 20-foot speed bump. That seasonal is a couple grand, and then we would install with our own crew, but I tend to think that, maybe it's this year, if we can find some money, maybe it's next year, but I just think that's. The best solution I can come up with, or that I've heard, that isn't gonna cost $1 million for the taxpayers, but I think is gonna have some meaningful effect, and will give Public Works the ability to plow in the winter unfettered. Maybe. Maybe we talk about not just the expense, but where they go, and how many we deploy. Maybe the number is 0 and you all disagree. But I've just come to believe it's a reasonable thing to consider.
And those on the list of maybe agenda items that got moved to the.
Yeah, I mean, this has been voiced public concern for a number of years, and it's not going to. We encourage you to consider purchasing a few of them that we can put out as soon as possible. Before the snow flies and while people are speeding around and some of them, and seeing how effective they are.
And I think part of the reason Randall's in the shape it's in is because we've got permanent speed bumps.
Yeah.
So
They're good at making cars bounce and create holes.
I'm just gonna go with it. That one sheet.
Perfect, and we're exactly at 7:45, but last call for questions or comments on our quarterly budget update.
Very good, the other one.
That one, the last.
And we tried pre-doing the windows, but I can see myself glowing in the Zoom, so
Next one.
thank you, Tom.
And like, I was a like crash. I should say. That's that last.
So our next agenda item is update on hazard mitigation grant application, FEMA buyouts and other flood resiliency projects. We just heard a little about FEMA reimbursement, but we also have a number of outstanding grant applications. Again, a topic that's been in the news a lot, so wanted to turn it over to Tom.
I included in the packet a spreadsheet. So this spreadsheet is a list of every project the state submitted to FEMA for consideration, excuse me, as part of a hazard mitigation grant. These projects in total are $62 million statewide. Now, what's interesting is there's not anywhere near that much money to go around. The state has requested about $55 million for buyouts. So we're really competing for a pretty small amount of funds with a lot of other folks. And the list at the very top is really the state's highest priorities, which has a different shade. If you go down below that on the high priority projects, of which we are one, they're in alphabetical order, and so I don't read anything into it beyond that. What I will say is on this spreadsheet, our project is the single most expensive project, Rainbow Meadow, which is a little under 4 million. Part of the project, there's the benefit cost analysis. You'll see that on the next to last column, the BCR ratio. Our project of all these ones on the list, has the fourth highest benefit cost analysis. So the fourth highest bang for your buck of a list of several dozen. So that's promising. At the same time, we are the most expensive. And so given how little funding is available, and given that the state is essentially requesting to have 80–90% of it set aside for buyouts, to be blunt, I don't have a great feeling that we're getting $3.8 million. I'm hoping then that we get some meaningful amount of money towards this project. But just given all the priorities on the list, and given what I know, even the skeletal information about some of these other projects, a lot of needy folks on this list. There's a reason that almost everything in this list is a high priority project, because I think overall Vermont needs some of this help.
There is all over this.
Yep, so I just wanna make that clear. And again, this comes from way back last year. We submitted a list we were encouraged to submit a list of everything. And so that included armoring the wastewater plant and raising the utilities here and doing some hydrology modeling and a whole host of things. And the one that made the cut to submit to the federal government was Rainbow Meadow. So we're in a holding pattern. I'm told generally 3 to 5 months. They hope to get some answer back. The other question I've asked is, I've said to the state that we have 9 buyouts that have been submitted, and 5 have been approved and reached the appraisal stage. The other 4, the rules have changed internally with FEMA, and so the state has had to repackage. And so I've told those 4 property owners that I have no idea at what point you will get a yes or a no on your buyout, and it could be tomorrow and it could be 6 months, but it's going to be some time, it sounds like. And I don't have any insight as to the answer, but what I've said to a few folks is, you've asked for $55 million for buyouts. If you get that money, presumably some of these projects won't make it to the finish line, because even if you approve it, the conversations I've had locally with people who are interested in buyouts is, okay, if FEMA approves it, I've still got to find a place to live, and the amount of money I get might not be enough to make that work for my life. And so I would expect of our 9 buyouts, not all of them become buyouts for that reason. And I've said that to the state, saying, well, there's $55 million, what happens if there's leftovers? And the preliminary answer I've got is, it does not go towards these projects. It just does not come to the state of Vermont. So I was hopeful that maybe there was a little more to work with, but it appears there is none, and so. Given that, I see Dana's here, who's doing some consulting work, and he's been extremely helpful to me. We're starting to look at alternatives. And I'm hopeful that perhaps between this and some other grants, we can string together a host of funding sources. But I guess I can sit at this point with 100%, I feel like with 100% confidence that we're working toward the bond. To fully fund this, that it just. You know, again, I think we're rated really high, we're fourth highest on the list in terms of cost benefit, but awful lot of projects on the list. Also just want to elaborate a little more on the FEMA buyouts. So of the 9, 5 are approved. That includes 21 Elm Street, that includes these 2 properties, 33 and 35 North Main, and then the 2 vacant properties in Union, I believe those are 36 and 40. But don't hold me on those house numbers. Those are all approved, appraisals have been given. It's still a long process from here on out. Even for the properties where the appraisal's been accepted, there's no real great word back from the state or FEMA as to how long the process takes from here on out. Which is a real challenge for property owners who, in some cases have rental properties and there's no income and they've still got to pay taxes. And then for the 2 properties on Main Street, there's some confounding environmental issues that make it even more difficult. And so the challenge of those properties is the select board has endorsed buyouts of those properties. So my job is to shepherd that to the finish line. But I'm also quite certain the select board doesn't want me to sign the deed to a property that's an environmental liability for the town. And so we've got to get through some final steps there. There's some state programs to put those properties, that we can roll those properties into, where the liability is not ours, but would be the state's overall liability, which I think is a great thing to do. It's a process to get it there and take some time. One of my questions to the state about those properties, and a simple example is the first step is we've got to do what's called a phase 1 environmental review, which is really a book review of the history. That's about $4,000 per property. According to the FEMA rules, that is an eligible FEMA expense as part of the buyout. So I said to the state, okay, sounds like FEMA should pay for the phase 1 review. And the answer was no, that FEMA has to essentially authorize that, and they didn't for those properties, despite them having some known contamination. So my next line of conversation was, I would consider doing this and having the town put a lien on the property, so we'll reimburse when the buyout occurs. My line of thinking was I didn't want to slow this down any more than it is already. And the answer I got back was, don't do that because it's going to be a long time still. So I'm got a few phone calls in, and I'm hopeful that there's actually some grant money to get this done, which will be a benefit for everyone. But it's all gonna just take some time and energy. So I'm, certainly no demolition of any Waterbury properties this year, hopefully 2026. I see Chris smiling, and you gotta laugh or cry, one or the other. But it's quite the process.
Board questions or updates on any of this? Mike?
Just more comment. I know you said that a cornfield project is the most expensive. But if you look at some of the other, the Barry, the Montpelier, this is at 2, if you add up the dollars that their projects are, they exceed our project. So it's not that we're asking,
As a town, we're not the most expensive. but
right,
as a
we're
single
not
project.
as a town, the most expensive. And I think it's a very needed project, not only for our town, but I think for the whole watershed. It's such a critical, because you know, floodplains, you need additional capacity. And that's just such a key area that creates a lot of additional capacity in the Winooski, which that whole floodway and floodplain going from Montpelier all the way down to the lake. Need is a very targeted need.
Yeah. And I don't wanna be too negative about it, it just, there's an awful lot of dollars chasing the smaller pot here. And there are some funding sources that we're digging into, they're not necessarily the full amount, but they could be significant. And the other conversation we haven't had is, it may be possible to phase this. And that we do this over a period of years, and if we get our first million, then maybe we do 25% of it, and we get some immediate flood relief. But, so we haven't had those conversations, and I think we'll get there once we get some clarity in the funding.
Have all communities in the whole Winooski watershed looked at like things such as, you know, Ducks Unlimited, I know has, you know, they're all involved in floodplains and wetlands, and there may be a significant amount of money on. I just hope they're looking at non-traditional sources of funding.
We are, I had a meeting with the Nature Conservancy not too long ago to have that conversation. Now, there's some clean water funds available, I think in general, most of us always view this hazard mitigation funds as our best bet.
Right.
And now we're there, we're just in the holding pattern.
Any questions? Does he want from Roger and two from the audience?
The original, study that, Roy Schiff did, targeted just the outer third of the Randall Meadow. So not ostensibly the project, we'll take that all first. And then, we're talking to the consultants from, Central Vermont Planning, they're talking about the phosphorus remediation funding, which is separate. Is that still available?
That's conversations we're having too. So yeah, we're getting there.
Valerie and then I was just wondering where the 4 million came from. Is there a like breakdown of that? So much
Yeah.
money.
So it's an estimate from a professional engineering firm.
It's going to level it, I mean.
So. It takes out, geez, I've said this number so many times, I forget it, maybe didn't know me, I forget the yardage of fill, but it's 100,000 yards of fill?
I don't recall, and I can pull that, but the overall elevation change might change over the 40 acres to the 1,000 and foot, and put that out, so the existing elevation. Removing the berm, and then the highest point of the cornfield, Randall Meadow, would go down between 6 and 8.5 feet. Again, it's based on super preliminary deposit.
Yeah, and that's the mound that you see that built up.
Did remove that.
Yeah.
That seems like a lot of money.
It's an awful lot of money and substantial, most of it's in trucking, just get it in. To its final home.
Wow, he's going to shoot you.
Chris was next, and then I want to move us on to our state on.
Gonna kind of jump on the tail end of that last couple of comments. Maybe Dana can shed some light on this. One question is, have you found a home for material yet? Next question is, let's say the job gets done. Has there been any study to anticipate sediment buildup from floods after the fact? What kind of maintenance costs are involved in continuing to clean out the area, maintain that lower specification? Is there any kind of a guess as to how much sediment could potentially be deposited back in there after each flood? This is just a one-time deal. And
Yeah.
you're gonna invite sediment into that area afterwards.
You're gonna invite water for sure. The hope is that part of the replanting and guess I would say rewilding of the area, we can minimize the sediment, but yeah, you're not wrong. And much of that buildup now is just occurred in the last few floods. What I will say is, sentiment from minor events is gonna be a maintenance challenge. If there's a declared disaster, removing the sediment is actually a eligible FEMA project, the same way repairing the road is.
So wouldn't they, revegetating that, depending on what you're talking about?
It might, and that's all part of the, I think, project planning.
Dana has a hand up, go ahead, Dana.
Our last, we have monthly Waterbury letters like annual meetings that are various cities and funders, things like that. And this actually came up as exact question came up at our last event. And floodplains typically have a sediment budget, so it's kind of sediment in, sediment out on an annual basis. And so like they do establish equilibrium over time, and also because this is a very specific project to entrain water and will also contain sediment. That's definitely been preliminarily talked about as part of the design, as in where do we quote unquote trap it and we usually or more easily maybe to get it. And so like we don't have any level of design yet that's gonna answer that question definitively. That's also part of that 3.8 mil is survey design. So like there's a lot of. It's definitely. You're right, it's design.
I just don't want to get into a cost to the taxpayers.
I'm hearing that there's lots of updates and also a 5 to 8 month holding plan on the most likely funding that we're still not sure about and a need to look at additional resources. So I think we're gonna be back here again on this and other topics continually. They've been a norm at most meetings. So I'll call it for tonight unless it feels pressing, King.
No,
All right, so next up, we have, the agenda says request for proposals, the draft, we have says request for qualifications. But related to Stanley Lawson, we had some preliminary, we've had conversation about multiple meetings at our last meeting. 2 weeks ago, we gave Tom as town manager some guidance around things the select board were interested in seeing this. He went to work drafting, so we have a draft that was provided on the town website today, and we have copies of, pertaining to Waterbury, as well as examples from Barry, Bells Fall, and Dorset to look at what other communities have done for this type of proposal. So I'll screen share the one pertaining to Waterbury for those on Zoom, but all of those are posted on the website. But Tom, I will turn it over to you to talk through this.
Sure, and there are other examples I can provide for people if interested. I thought these were the most relevant examples. There are some other towns that have essentially done complete site planning. And spent a lot of money on site planning, engineering and design and put an RFP that essentially says. Build 80 units for us. Here's the 50-page backup detail. We're not at that point. So the way I drafted this, and I wanna be clear, draft one. Consider that I have no pride of authorship in this, and I'm very happy to consider amendments. So after some thought, I drafted as a request for qualifications. Which would get us to a point where we then would do. Have a negotiation and proposal stage with the developer. Tried to outline some of the history and the main conditions. The main zoning considerations, setbacks, design review, historic district within the designated downtown. Wanted to be clear, I didn't say no Act 250 permit because my understanding of the law today is. Even in a designated downtown with water and sewer, your cap is 50. And above that, there's an Act 250 requirement. So if you're building 51 units, you've got to have it. I think there's some minor tweaks to that rule if there's an affordable component, but 50 is kind of the rule. And then I want to be clear, the phase 1 environmental review is listed here as completed. It will be completed soon. That's a requirement of some of the grants we're pursuing. But put it in there as completed, because I think by the time this is all finalized, it certainly will be. Project goals, I tried to take your direction from prior meetings, as best I could and just iron out what I thought were the biggest goals of the project. So talked about market rate, talked about an affordable component. Talked about opportunities for people who live in the floodplain. Talked about seniors, and I think those were all themes I've heard. We tried to hit all what I thought were the major highlights, 60-foot height restrictions. Which would apply unless you want to spend $1 million and buy us a firecracker. There was some conversation about somehow incorporating public park on the edge of the parcel. Some understanding that there's going to need to be investments in sidewalks, crosswalks, things like that as part of the project. I did note that I hadn't heard any real support for a commercial element to it, like a retail component, for example. But I thought if a developer thinks that's feasible and that's part of their desired project, let's let the private sector give us their creativity. And then also tried to make it clear to anyone who responded that, we've got some ability in-house and some horsepower to work with the developer, and if there's funding programs that are mutual benefit, that's something I think that I certainly am quite open to. So really what I wrote here as part of the RFQ is a deliverable that I think by design is relatively open-ended. It's a deliverable that gives us a conversation with a sophisticated developer and also a clear understanding of some of the main considerations. Number of units, outline the goal, here are our goals outlined, you tell us how these goals are achieved. If you think you're gonna need zoning variances up front, let us know at the start of the process. If your proposed purchase price is different than what we have to pay, more or less, then obviously that's key information at the part of the process. And then the thought would be from here that we select a developer, and then phase 2 with that one developer is the formal proposal stage. Which would, in my mind, culminate in a final vote. Essentially adopting the project and moving forward. Intentionally did not fill in the section on deadlines, because I think we're some time away from that. Intentionally did not line out if there's an internal project review team and who might that be. Left that up to board consideration. And if the board tells me we want more of an RFP, not an RFQ, then that's happy to talk about that too. But I just tend to think, after reviewing what other towns, cities and towns have done, that the RFQ was the best option. And I really encourage everyone to look at the examples. Barry's, for example, was really simple. Just submit a letter of interest. We're giving a piece of land away for $1. Given we've got to spend taxpayer money on this land, I thought some more specificity was in order for Waterbury. I think Barry viewed their project as a challenge in general, and that they had to make it super attractive. And then if you go down to Rockingham, there's quite a bit more detail fleshed out in terms of project description and goals. And they've done a little more work than we have in terms of getting the project ready. And so there's a little more detail in those proposals that, again, I just encourage everyone to read and get thoughts. And they go so far as to provide some conceptual site plans. And then Dorset is another, I thought, comparable example where there's what I would describe as a medium level of detail. I think they pretty clearly outline the goals for the projects that they want to have. And in Dorset, they're transferring a piece of land for $1 and they're contributing money towards infrastructure and pre-construction. So they're you know, they've got some immediate skin in the game in a different way, but I looked at those as I thought relevant examples. Rather than those projects where a city or a town essentially fully designed and engineered a parcel about what they wanted and said to the developer, give us your price, here's what we want done to the T. I thought there was value in letting the private sector tell us their thoughts and give us some creativity, and maybe we'll get proposals that are, you know, cookie cutter condominiums. And maybe we'll get proposals that are really creativity and appeal to us. But that was my first crack at it, if you will, based on our conversations, and again, real happy to. No pride of authorship, real happy to edit the heck out of this. I know that's always tough in real time. So consider this for F1.
Thank you, Tom, for all your work in preparing this and for the examples, and I heard an open invitation for group editing, which is always fun, but I will start with the select board on input, questions, considerations for Tom, naming this is the first time we're seeing this draft. We talked about it, all that, and came back to us with this. So people have feedback, things they want to see. Anyone feel excited to start?
I'll pick this up. Going back, there's so many. It's quite the package. I think the open-endedness for now suffices my concerns. I didn't want it to be too specific and turn away developers. And I think Tom touched on, I could think everything we talked about at the previous meeting where we discussed this. And I have no objections to this as written now.
Thank you. Mike, go ahead.
And I was actually quite pleased with your design of the RFQ. I know there was gonna be some additional supporting documentation, maps and stuff like that, which I think is gonna be critical to any developer to look at. You know, it's interesting to see that a lot of these projects will be offered for $1, while we're offering ours at $400,000, so that's gonna be, could be a bit of a, you know, but I think they can involve, just like them purchasing any developable property, and in this state, $400,000 is not a lot of money, so, you know, I have looked at so many different housing projects, and 400,000 is not, especially in this market, it's not me raise a red flag. I think you a lot of the, I think you gave them a lot of options, what the town looks as potential goals. And I think that's really key to get a good developer who's, you know, most developers, their motivation is profit in one way or another, whether they be nonprofit, you know, even the nonprofits have, proper profit motivation to keep them going. But I think, it's giving them a, you know, a guide on where to go, and I think you give them, you know, this was a really good staff. In addition to having a lot of supplemental information, I think that's gonna, you know, I hope it's gonna get some developers' interest. That's what we all wanna see.
Roger, anything to add?
Yeah, basically, just what Mike said, I think it's a reasonable way to get an idea of the realm of the possible without a lot of taxpayer expense. And I think that's what we're interested in, and it still gives us some time to engage the public and us to see what we get, and so to what extent that fits their desires.
Speaking for myself as an individual member, not chair, I would say I love the request for qualifications. I think that does seem like the right fit. I was struck that I don't think we mentioned the floodplain. It notes the design review and historic district. Maybe I missed it somewhere in the history, but noting,
Under deliverables, I did. Under item 5, I just wrote specific focus should be given on your ability, But I didn't,
I guess my question is, I have,
Oh, yeah, section 2, subsection C.
okay. I'm just naming that. I do think it's within the historic area flood hazard overlay, which is its own set of zoning regs that require elevation 2 feet above that. So given that we're calling that it's within design review and within historic district, to me, it's odd that we don't also say that. If it's true, that you need to verify it with
that's,
zoning.
and that's. Neil hasn't had a chance to review it yet, but
Totally.
that's the language I was looking for, I think.
Yeah, just within, just in transparency, I think it's something that we've raised as the public. So in addition to those 2 areas, but otherwise I think it's good. For me personally, I think next steps would be having a timeline, and if there's any other selection criteria we want to be clear about upfront, so that we kind of know that ahead of time when it's going out, what we're gonna be looking for when we go back. Again, I had no problem with Tom's field, but just that note, but otherwise I think moving forward with some deadlines for reaction, at the next. Sense.
And in terms of selection, I did not write anything about proposal review team. I just assumed this is the select board business.
How are we going throughout this, which I think is a critical matter? Getting this RFQ out, what channels are you envisioning this going on?
So I would use the LCT for everything because it's free, but there's actually an email listserv for the Vermont Development Community. That's a good way to get this out. I'll see if I can dig into it. There's a few industry publications that many commercial real estate firms use.
So that's what we want to have like as broad, to get as much interest. Anyway.
Yes, I think Joe, who's maybe listed as the contact for Dorset, works for Whitenberg, who sponsors that listserv, and I've seen them on the Vermont planners too, all of that. I saw Evan had a hand up there in the back.
Kind of a 2-part question, it's right here in the first sentence. It says you're looking for somebody to construct, own, and operate. Does that mean that the developer would be the person owning this property indefinitely and being the landlord? The project's complete.
So that's my thought process. From what I've gathered, this is a big project. So the larger Vermont development firms have a development arm and then they'll create an LLC to own and manage the property. That's a typical model it feels to me.
So that would rule out any kind of home ownership possibilities, condominiums.
I don't think it would rule out condominiums. But yeah, it would rule out single family homes for sure. As written.
Other questions? Yep, Sharon.
Okay, so listen, so Tom, I do have some recommendations of things that I would. I'm not gonna go into them tonight, are you okay with me kind of doing them on the document and sending it to you?
Whatever, if you wanna do that, if you wanna have a phone call.
Yeah, I'd love to, like, I would recommend a down select even, to further, depending on how many you get, to further, get to what you want. I would also be a little bit more specific on the criteria, your scope, the complexity, and your size. You said you want to be, so when you're looking for experience, I would also say maybe no more than 3 and have to fit that scope, size, and complexity. They don't, you're out. And then one of the things that you can use for a down select is give us an innovative, creative ideas. Those that with a bit higher confidence for you to, go into that phase 2 and looking at what you're actually proposing to be.
Yeah.
That could be some of my
Yep, let me, I've got your email, let's set up a phone call this week.
Okay, sounds
Great.
good.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, I'm done.
Yep, I see Martha online next.
Thanks, Alyssa. Hey, Tom, very nice proposal. Coming from, and I noticed it's consistent through all of the other samples, but coming from the development community. The one word I don't see in the very beginning, they all start with construct, own and operate. And I think you might want to add something in the beginning with respect to their design capabilities, their structural engineering capabilities. I would use the word design and permit. That's the other element that's not, it starts from the construction position rather than the development of the project. And so you might want to just think about adding that to the beginning.
Okay, let me work on that over the next couple of days, and how about I email you a couple thoughts?
Sure.
Sounds like you got some experience that'll be helpful.
Sure. I just think this is an RFQ, their qualification, like the one that pops into my head right away is if it's primarily a construction company, who are they using for architects? You know, who are they gonna bring in for the front end to lay out the plans? And so if that's how my brain thinks, is you got in there the idea of key personnel, and I think it would be key personnel and subcontractors, so that you know who they're planning on making their team. Because if it is a smaller firm, they're gonna have to contract it out. They're gonna have partners. And then the only other item, and I have no idea I'm not gonna frame this very well, but there might be other financing models that a developer might want to propose. And would it be worthwhile to offer that as a deliverable? Like if you have a different investment model that you'd like to propose, if it's a turnkey operation, something just to open that opportunity for some creative financing structure.
So that's interesting, Martha. A couple of the samples I've read get into the weeds a little bit about developer financing, and some don't at all.
Yeah.
Some of them literally, just want to see, almost want to see it to the penny, and it's a partnership, but right, we own the land until we don't. So we've certainly got the right to ask for information. I guess I wonder, should that be more towards the end as phase 2 when we start negotiating with the developer about a formal agreement? Do we want to see that nitty gritty, or do you think that's more the upfront information?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't ask them for nitty gritty now. You can ask them for a general, I'm not coming up with the word I want here, but a general framework within which they would see the financing to fruition.
Okay, thank you, Martha.
Sure. Nice document.
Other questions or input on this?
Obviously, one of the challenges in this project and making the numbers work, whoever the developer may end up being, who's gonna wanna try to fit as much capacity in width, length, and height of this project. Coming out of the gate, they're gonna lose obviously some of that height to flood area. It's gonna have to be kind of a unique design to accompany or utilize that space. And then create whatever they're gonna create above it. Depending on the design. If there are 3 applicants or whatever, however many of it boils down to. 3 different ones or 4 different ones. And the select board decides that there's a particular project that fits Waterbury better. But the numbers don't quite work. Is there any give with the state when it comes to purchase of that property?
Not at this time, no.
So we know, strong,
No, that would have to be,
contemplation and effort, even just plain turning it over.
we've made that request before. We can keep trying, but
It seems like a pretty solid.
it feels like it's pretty solid.
And what's the reasoning for it? I mean, because they're the ones that are screaming affordable housing.
So the reasoning for it that they've said to me is that, one, this is different than Randall Meadow, which they were happy to give away, I think, because the project also benefits them. But the reasoning for it was, I guess at the time, the head of the agency, Building General Services, wasn't opposed to not owning the property, but commented about how even though there was no use for the land now, that she was a little wary of giving it away, because anytime the state tries to buy land and build something, they tend to pay a premium above market, and they tend to face an awful lot of, community pushback, no matter what they build. And so they already own the land here, and so from their perspective, it's a lot easier to do something when you own it. So I think in general, she wasn't thinking about this year, but she was thinking about the next 10, 20 years, and once you lose it, it's gone. So from that perspective, there was some value to keeping it, and so her position was, we're gonna get rid of it. The state should be paid market rate, and it shouldn't just benefit Waterbury, it should be every resident of the state benefits from the market rate paid for the land. And then I think the legislature agreed.
It's funny, I'm just thinking about the state complex down here and how much is that really being utilized today?
Very
And
well.
I see very few cars there.
Yeah.
Did I spend a whole lot of money down there for what?
I see Billy online, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to comment, and Tom, thanks for doing all this work. Two comments. One, I don't remember and I couldn't find it. I thought the final phase one bylaw changed the zoning district of this parcel to mixed use if it was segregated from the campus district. And I tried to flip through, and maybe Martha, if this is appropriate for the select board, can either correct me that we decided not to add it or find it, but I think it's a mixed use. So that's just a technical point. The policy question I guess I'd ask comment too is, if you construct, operate, or own, are we saying that the developer has to be a landlord and can't sell any of the units? And that might be a question that's way above my pay grade, but it's a conversation I know the Housing Task Force has had, and maybe you want to have it as well, as to whether a developer could sell some of these units or all, subject to affordability criteria, as opposed to only having it be a landlord-tenant relationship.
So it sounds like, Billy, from your comment and a couple others, it probably should say construct, operate, and/or own.
Yeah, or you could throw in the word lease, maybe, something like that. If that would work better grammatically.
And Martha reminds us to include design, construct.
Well, we're always happy to add words in the planning commission.
Noted. Other main points, Billy, on this? Appreciate it.
No, thanks.
Billy's right about the zoning district change too.
So Martha noting that we do need to update the Billy Martha team on zoning updates. And it sounds Tom doing that and need to follow up. Awesome. Other questions or comments on this? Tom, do we think updates for next meeting, incorporating some of these minor changes and conversation and maybe some proposed dates, and we can take another peek?
Yep, absolutely.
Other questions, comments, direction from the board? All right, more to report on next meeting on this. And thank you again, Tom. Alrighty. Next up, we have Better Connections, updates and steering committee appointments. We have a memo from Tom on appointments. We did a batch of 12 appointments to the steering committee at our last meeting, and per Tom's memo on July 18th. They're requesting to enlarge the steering committee to include Jake, I'm gonna say it wrong, Ferriera, I can never do it. Ruben McMartin from CBRPC. And then Faith Bell with Agency of Transportation and Natalie from ACCD. So I guess, Tom, these are all state project partners who wanted to be formally appointed, is that correct?
Yeah, Jake was a local that,
Okay, thank you.
that we requested. The other are project partners, so the state wanted CBRPC, being the committee, and Ruben McMartin is their regional, is their planner, senior transportation planner. And then given the state is funding the effort, they wanted the two liaisons from those respective agencies to be on the steering committee. Seems quite reasonable since they're giving us $100,000.
Questions or comments from select board members, little Mike and Roger?
What would the ultimate size of the steering committee be now with the addition?
15, 16, to meet about monthly. It's a little,
That's what.
I viewed it as large, and the state really encouraged us to have a big group.
Roger?
I think, given the fact that having these additional individuals involved is going to increase the likelihood that whatever recommendation they come up with will get funded for implementation, I'll move that we accept their proposal to include these individuals that I named on the steering committee.
Second.
Motion by Roger, second by Kane to add these for additional folks to the steering committee. Is there any further discussion or questions? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Before we move on, I want to check in, Tom, if there's any other updates about this. I think we also named that we don't have a select board member on the steering committee, but several of us were planning to attend when possible. I don't know if we can get put on the email list or if we have a schedule yet for the next meetings.
Don't have a schedule yet. We just selected Sandtech as the consultant to lead the effort. They've got a big full service firm. They've done a lot of similar studies, and they've done studies funded through the Better Connections grant. So I think they're gonna be a good option. So we've selected them, have to get to the contract stage, and then have to set a kickoff meeting and establish dates. So we'll get there soon enough.
Any other questions on this? Great, any questions? Right. I will move us on to our next item, which is update on select input needed for town plan aspirations, goals, and strategies drafting. So this is part of the work the planning commission is doing as part of the town plan update. And I am so thrilled that we have multiple planning commission members here who could speak to this much more eloquently than I could. So Martha did agree via text. That's why I was texting that she was willing to speak to this. So thank you, Martha. I'll let you as chair of the planning commission, maybe just talk about generally the town plan process, but what this agenda item meant for the select board.
Yeah, Alyssa, I think as we did at the Housing Task Force meeting, is there a chance you could bring up on your screen the Montpelier City Plan? Or
Yeah.
I can share my screen, or somebody, if you want to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have, as you folks know, we have completed our community survey. We've completed multiple visioning sessions. Thanks to the wonderful efforts of Dana and Robbie and Billy, in fact, primarily, they have compiled and they have taken all of the data that we've gotten in and compiled it, categorized it based upon the chapters that we're targeting. We don't have official names quite yet, but we're pretty much there. So Alyssa, if you'd go to the plan chapter title up at the top, and then select, for this meeting, select utilities. there you go. And, this gives you, what, the reason I'm asking her to pull this up is this is our target. This is a model target of where we're headed, to be an online, web-based, town plan, municipal plan. There will be a, PDF printed if needed document that can sit on a shelf that no one will ever look at. But we also will have a much more user-friendly, accessible, internet-based town plan. You can you can scroll down. It's two elements. There's story maps that show the different types of facilities that are currently in the town. There's another one if you stop there. So this shows all, and then zoom in on the map, you can see that it will identify where our town facilities are. So this is a visual representation of it. Then I'm going to ask you to click the synergies button up at the top. I'm jumping around here a little bit, but there's going to be conversations about how the different chapters relate to each other and the overlap of our aspirations, the town's aspirations, goals, and strategies to achieve our goals and aspirations. And then there's, if you want to hit the implementation summary, I'm pretty sure that's the one that has the, if you scroll down, there should be the implementation plan. You might have to go, sorry, I might have to have it go back up. It's,
View the full one here, this one, Martha.
there you go. Yeah, thank you. So I'm keying in here on the select board, the town items relevant to the town plan. And Alyssa, or Neil sent to Alyssa the summary of what we heard in the visioning and the community survey of what community members would either compliment or comment on our town infrastructure, our utilities, our facilities. Neil and I attended an EFUD meeting a week ago, I believe, or a little bit longer, and ran through this same process. And so you've been sent another survey that asks the select board to identify what they see as, what you see as, you know, the top 3 aspirations for the community. And then goals, I think it's 5 goals, or a number of goals to achieve those aspirations. And then the last step, well, in whatever order that you arrive at, the strategies that would be appropriate to achieve the goals that would arrive at the aspirations. And we have, so what we're going to do is we'd like to have it, if it's possible, for your survey to be back to the Planning Commission around the 10th of August. We're going to compile that with, I'm trying to find my list here. Waterbury Ambulance, Waterbury Fire Department. Tom, I think we have here that we'd like to ask the staff, and I guess that kind of goes through you as well. I'm not sure if Neil sent it to you or not, but anyway, then our idea here is, or the concept is, that beginning August 25th, we're going to utilize time at our regular scheduled planning commission meetings to take the surveys that we receive back on this particular chapters. So for August 25th, for example, we hope to talk about the local economy, facilities, utilities, and local government, those elements of the town plan. The next September 8th, we have housing. September 22nd, we have energy and transportation, and on and on. And then there will be, I'm sure that there will be additional conversations, but these will be posted, the topics for those planning commission meetings. We hope to have a first run through by the 10th of November, which is the land use, that'll be the land use chapter. And we're putting that because it feeds into, many of the chapters feed into the land use section. And then moving into the holiday season, November, beginning of December, I expect we'll probably have additional meetings that will either go revisit the conversations or it's a constant filtering down of the information that we receive to arrive at the aspirations, goals, and strategies for each chapter. Does that help, Alyssa?
It's amazing. Thank you, Martha. What was I gonna say? I did actually pull up their survey just to give, so Martha, that's the meta context for Martha, and just wanted to recognize and appreciate for everyone. Let's see if I can handle this. So this is the link to the Google form. I thought I certainly didn't want to be filling it out unilaterally on behalf of the select board, so today was really the preview to say we need this information by August 10th. We have another meeting on August 4th, so my hope would be that we can finalize what we would like to submit on behalf of the select board then. But now people know kind of that it's on the radar for the future. Again, kind of three, I will say we tried to do this in housing task force. I'll provide the update later. It's hard and it's a lot. So if select board members have input on the aspirations, goals, and strategies, I can probably crowdsourcing them through me or Tom. So we have a list to start the meeting is going to be useful. Sorry, this is ultimately what we're going to fill them in. Again, there's some examples here from Montpelier about what they look like. But then I specifically wanted to give credit to the planning commission because we're now going to scroll through really quickly the amount of groups and organizations that are being consulted. So obviously we're weighing in on behalf of the select board. We're ultimately going to approve the whole town plan, but they've really made an intentional effort that I just want to applaud to reach out to groups with relevant topic expertise for all of these topics. So obviously I will, Tom will do municipal government, I will do select board. And then again, Martha, if I'm getting it right, then there's the meetings that's pulling together all the folks in a relevant topic to kind of talk through it further. And there will be a schedule for that.
Yeah, and each one of those, we tried to target each one of those groups. When you click on any one of those, like the recreation committee, it takes you to the summary of what we heard regarding recreation in the community. And so they will, at the top of their, when you actually you could click the select board one, you could click one of those and you'll see that it will provides the summary of the information we've gathered so far for the relevant chapter that they work around. It also offers the opportunity to click on another chapter. So like a good example in my head is Waterbury Leap. So Duncan obviously his group will click, when he clicks on it, it'll go to the energy chapter summary, the summary of the energy chapter information that we heard. He also may want to click on the transportation if he wants to participate in the conversation around the transportation plan, then he has the opportunity at the end of his survey to click another section and go there. So because we're very aware that this is not buckets of information, and that's why I wanted to highlight the synergies of the different chapters that will relate to each other. And so people, entities, organizations, stakeholders are definitely going to want to comment. I would expect would want to comment on other chapters as well.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone on this? Again, we plan to have more follow-up for our next meeting on August 4th. Billy, I see you unmuted. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I just want to point out, we're trying to put up all of those summary, even though when you click through, you've been assigned a set of comments. We think as of a few days ago, we put all the summaries up on our website, Plan WTB, so you can see as much as all of our summaries of all of the comments we've gotten. And I think it comes beyond 3,000 data points that we've collected since October.
That's perfect, because my follow-up is that I didn't know that I had the breakout of the comments, so I will just direct folks to all of them with special focus on that. Tom, I'm having the horrible real-time realization that I don't think we're reporting Orca is here.
Yes, you are. Yes,
So
you are correct.
we should start the recording right now.
Yeah.
Not me.
Recording in progress. On our own Zoom as well, and I'm responsible for what pieces, so I'm so glad you're here and thank you, and I see that Orca has been on Zoom all night, so hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers, that's enough backup. I don't know who pulls from what video file, but
I'll
I
make
just
sure.
noticed that, so we're doing that now. Is there any other questions? Alright, with that, I will turn it to select board and municipal manager informational updates. Mine follows very closely from this, so I'll just go first and say I went to the housing task force meeting last Thursday, 7/17. We did this exercise as it pertained to housing. And I will name it took a little while, even within one task force or one group of people have pretty different aspirations, goals, strategies. So we likely are gonna need to have another special meeting before August 10th to finalize the input for planning commission. Unfortunately, that housing task force meeting was during the regional select board meetup. I don't know if anyone was able to make it from Waterbury. I did follow up with Abby Friedman, who's one of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns staffers who was there. She said it was a small but mighty group, but that the regional planning commission was interested in hosting them in the future. So had I not had a conflict, I would have loved to attend and hope to go to a future one. That is all I have besides stuff on the agenda. Go to Roger.
The rec committee meets tomorrow night, so have more than enough.
Mike.
No big updates, just I was glad to hear that the DRB was gonna, maybe post cancellation of the and stuff like that.
And Kate.
Nothing for me.
And I'm backtracking against my own item because I got phased and just wanted to thank and acknowledge the planning commission for all the work going into the 3,000 data points. This very intentional, intensive process. And we'll get back to you in the survey. So thank you to all of you for being here and working on this.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks, Martha.
And then Tom, any other updates that weren't covered?
Yeah, couple quick things. Had some emails and actually met today with Bill Woodruff and Ned Houston. You may recall a couple years ago, there was a conversation before this board about the land that was owned by Chilia Russell that's been conserved now through, I think, the Waterbury Land Initiative. And so Ned is on that board and came to see us about building a gravel parking. Geofabric, some small culverts, several hundred yards of gravel. Not land we own. And I said to Ned, sounds like a good 2026 project that I think we need a conversation about to ensure that, maybe if the town is gonna invest in a parking lot, there's some conversation with the neighbors about that. There's likely a zoning permit, but there's also no trails on the property, or at least formal trails, and I know the land is conserved, but I said to Ned, perhaps if we're gonna build a parking lot, we need some assurance that the land is indeed open to the public. So I think that might be a future topic for us to consider, and I think Ned might make that request. Also,
Is he representing the?
believe so, yeah. Also, just wanted to talk about, we had a brief conversation about this a while back. We have leftover grant money that was initially awarded in 2017, and it was pertaining to sidewalks on 100. And that conversation has been kickstarted. The grant technically, period ends in September, but we're gonna sign an amendment to the agreement. So the grant was for $242,000. It's got a 20% local match. We've only spent about 25 grand, so most of those funds are available. In conversations today, we talked about now that we're nearing the end of the Stowe Street Bridge, and interestingly enough, the initial scope of that project was to engineer sidewalks along that whole area of Lincoln Street Bridge down 100. Some of that's done because the bridge project incorporates that. So the revised scope is from where the Stowe Street project ends to have a crosswalk along 100 and have sidewalks to both of the gas stations on each side.
on both sides.
both sides, was the conversation we had today. Computer died.
I'm still in the Zoom. Let me see if anyone, I'm gonna actually unmute on my computer because Tom's email died. But it's running the Zoom.
A new owl, and I don't have the converter, and it all runs off one USB-C.
Hi, if you're still on the Zoom. The camera that was running the owl, the computer that was running the owl camera died, but we're still here and you're still on Zoom, so that's what's happening. I'll get the owl in a moment on my computer. How fun. Thank you.
It almost made it a whole meeting.
Oh, it's full. I need it full. I know.
That could be the new limitation
we love
of
the
meeting.
tech.
length.
We're both just frozen looking very contemplative, Tom.
Okay.
Let's see if I can adjust my video.
Okay, I think we might be back in business. Let me just make sure the audio is going through the echo. I think we need anyone online who can hear you.
Back where we were.
Okay, so we have leftover grant funds from that 2017 grant. We're gonna start working towards repurposing them. Bill Woodruff said today, we had used Stan Tech for that originally. We'd like to stick with Stan Tech because they did the original work and they also were the engineer for the Stowe Street Bridge. May have to go through a process to rebid, but hoping we don't. But we're gonna work in that grant amendment and then more information coming. Hopeful that the grant funds will allow us to engineer the project. And then we'll just have to get some, that'll include cost estimates about, then we'll have cost per square foot and how much it costs to get further down the road. But we've got the grant funds, we'll start with them to use. And those were my couple updates that weren't part of the meeting.
Any other updates? All right, next up, I have review meeting agenda. If you flip over, I really am leaning into using the agenda as a meeting planning tool and or inbox management, because I get a lot of emails and I'm trying to slot things in. Let's check the next meeting date is correct. Yes, August 4th, 6:30 p.m. Things that were bumped from this meeting, capital plan review was something we were hoping for and just wasn't ready yet, but that is on the list. Not once, but twice, we have the continued discussion of we can now call it request for qualifications. That we talked about this evening. We just reviewed earlier with Martha, the select board input on the town plan aspiration stuff. Parade and event permit is hanging out for always in the holistic sense, but we at least will have the specific jam for the parks one. Is there other things folks would like to see on the agenda? I have to be scheduled presentation from Susan Clark, which Roger is helping out with, and thank you. Cheryl contacted me wearing her Waterbury Historical Society hat about the Vermont 250 Waterbury Committee. We have an email from the Regional Planning Commission about the regional future land use map. I have no idea what dates they have available, so that's a follow-up in conjunction with the Planning Commission. Chris brought up invasives as a future. But anything specifically for next meeting, folks think is important.
Didn't Waterbury celebrate its 250th already?
Vermont 250, the whole state.
Okay, Vermont.
Oh, thank you, sorry.
I know it's the whole country.
The Republic of Vermont. It's a 2-year big.
What do you want to do?
Because I have my 250 t-shirt.
Sounds like the group is excited, so I think we should bump it to August 4th, because it sounds like Cheryl is ready. As soon as we were ready, there was a resolution in the packet. We'll have lots of materials to share, so.
About the Vermont 250.
Yes.
I already know too much about this.
Yes,
If you could send me a copy of that email, please.
yes, I will,
You
and
sent it to the whole floor.
yeah, I will send it, I originally did just send it to Alyssa and Tom as an agenda request, and then figured they would distribute it, but I can send it to everybody today. Cool, thank you.
I've been promised that if I ever am asked to grow period facial hair, that I will be divorced, so the statement in advance.
You don't
That's
want,
good to
you don't
know,
want
because
giant
it's
sideburns?
Not out of the realm of possibility.
You know what, Tom, I'll do giant sideburns with you. I think. If we can get conservation in here. Well, maybe not. To start the conversation about the invasive, because this week, they are spreading quite rapidly.
Well, if Public Works is here for the capital plan.
We can wrap it all in the box to a bow.
You might wanna have also the Friends of Waterbury Reservoir, they're very involved in invasive around it.
Okay, so hearing the invasives thing, sounds like Public Works will be here so they can speak to it. Amy, I know is online. I think the specific request was Mike as the liaison to the Conservation Commission. Could you please email them and say, we heard about invasives. I think it was suggested when Amy was here in person.
Yep.
This would be above their quarterly update, but we could just let them know if they're available. Ditto Friends of the Reservoir, but just let me know per Cheryl's note in transparent scheduling. I get a lot of requests. It's figuring out how many we can get. The agenda is mostly on time tonight. No big deal. But all right, sounds great. Does that feel sufficient for the next meeting? Anything else? Capital plan will likely be a while, especially because it's roads, bridges, culverts and sidewalks. So,
I'll reach out to Susan Clark, but I don't want to be presumptuous that she would be available on the fourth, so that we look at subsequent dates.
and I did, but since he's here, tell Roger that Evan, you specifically requested to go on
Yeah.
that same meeting date, so he's aware of that as well.
Concurrence.
All right, any other specific updates? All right, with that, we have executive session, same for transparency for anyone here or online, so we have executive session, we're gonna do executive session with the select board and the manager, and executive session with just the select board. We do likely have action after executive session, that does need to be in public session, so we will leave the Zoom running in this room. And return to it to do that. So folks can stay for an hour, folks can go elsewhere and tune back into the Zoom if they're curious about it. But that will be the process, as we'll leave the Zoom up running and recording in this room, and then we will come back with it out of executive session to back in here. But we have both labor negotiations and personnel, so the motions around that from the select board.
I move to find the premature public knowledge of labor negotiations. Town personnel would place the town of Waterbury at a substantial disadvantage.
Motion by Kane, second by Mike. Is there any further discussion? Right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Right,
I'm gonna go to executive session.
right. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Kane, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. 9:53, we exited an executive session. Is there any motion?
I move. I'm trying to word this right. I move. Yeah, thank you, to. Re-enter into. An employment contract with the municipal manager for 3 years. Yes, that's a good motion.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Right, we will sign the final employment contract. Congratulations, Tom. That's effective on August 1.
August 1.
As the current one went through the end of July. And with that, I would take a motion to adjourn. For a second.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Right, we are adjourned at 9:54 PM. Thank you all.